Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for the new normal, understanding dating culture and dating abuse in today's society. My name is Brianna Rawlings. I am with the National Domestic Violence Hotline. In this webinar, we will be discussing current trends along with social and cultural norms from the perspective of teens and young adults. We will also talk about what young people are experiencing, including challenges around healthy relationships and dating abuse. As a reminder, we are recording today's webinar for playback purposes, and your lines are currently in listen-only mode. You may follow along with the presentation by using the webinar link that you received with your confirmation email. We will have time for questions at the end of the presentation, and we will respond to the questions that you submit using the chat tab in your control panel, which should be showing up on the side of your screen. Also, there is a toolkit available for download, which you can also find in your webinar screen under the Handouts tab. Before we get started, we would like to thank two very important partners who work with Love is Respect to prevent and end dating abuse and promote healthy relationships. Thank you to the Administration on Children, Youth and Families, Family and Youth Services Bureau, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Office on Violence Against Women, U.S. Department of Justice. Without you, today's webinar would not be possible. We are very pleased to have joining us today three people who are committed to ending dating abuse, all of whom play a critical role in helping Love is Respect achieve its mission. Jasmine Uribe is a passionate leader in the dating abuse prevention movement and serves as leadership and engagement manager for Break the Cycle. She manages Break the Cycle's youth programs, advocating for peer-to-peer education and activism, inclusion of youth-led and informed practices, and supervises the Love is Respect National Youth Advisory Board. Michaela Thomas is a manager of digital services at Love is Respect and the National Domestic Violence Hotline. She oversees the implementation of nationwide online chat and text advocacy and crisis intervention. With an extensive background in youth engagement and empowerment, she is passionate about healthy relationship education, which she sees as a critical piece in creating a future without violence. And Grace Wickerson is a member of the Love is Respect National Youth Advisory Board and is a part of the executive team. Passionate about youth-led advocacy, she is the founder of Kick In Violence, a national nonprofit that seeks to empower the next generation of nonviolence leaders through educational awareness, service for survivors, and martial arts training. And now I will send it over to Jasmine for the remainder of the presentation.
Thank you, Brianna. It's so great to have you all joining us today. We have a very exciting workshop or webinar planned. I'm happy to have Grace and Michaela joining me, so let's get started. Just to recap on who we are. So Love is Respect is the project between Break the Cycle and the National Domestic Violence Hotline. You heard us say that already. Just wanted to put that out there to say who we are. We really come together and work together to bring the ultimate resource for young people to learn more about how to have healthy relationships. So here's our presentation overview. Today we're going to focus on the dynamics of youth relationships, what's going on today, answering that question a lot on, what's going on with language, how are young people talking about relationships and dating. We will also explore some of the facts about digital or technology abuse, some of the boundaries within social media, sexting, texting, all of that. We're going to put an emphasis on boundaries in relationships, so you'll hear us talk about that a lot. And then lastly, we're going to end with giving you some pointers and some tips on how to start the conversation with youth to promote action. This could be awareness building, this could be having conversation with their peers, but the end goal is to help them prevent and end dating violence. So we're going to get into the Tweak Your Speak activity that we do in all of our trainings, and that is looking at teen language. So when we think, how do teens define dating, or relationships. Some of these words may look familiar, maybe they don't, but let's break it down a bit. So you can use your chat box to add any words that you know of or the young people that you work with. Maybe they don't use any of these words, maybe they use another word. But let's start off with the famous BAE. So BAE is actually an acronym for before anyone else. And because we're putting an emphasis on dating culture and boundaries, I do want to say that sometimes that before anyone else, sometimes young people will say like, okay, well, I put this person before even me or myself. So that can be a dangerous and unhealthy trait in relationships. So that's what BAE means. I've been in many presentations, and no, it does not mean bacon and eggs. So BAE is an acronym for before anything or anyone else. That may be news, but maybe you already knew that. There's also a transition with relationships now in terms of commitment. So you see these two words, open and situationship. Again, these are all real words that we've collected throughout our trainings and in schools across the country. And open or situationship connects to the idea of not being in a committed monogamous relationship or not being tied down, quote unquote. So having an open relationship may mean you have multiple partners. You may be dating multiple partners or going out. And a situationship, I quote the young person that told me this, they said, it's not a relationship, it's just a situationship. We just have things going on, there's nothing serious. But we know that even if it is a situationship, there may be unhealthy behavior. So we want to make sure we are understanding how young people are defining relationships so we can meet them where they are. There's also DM. So there's a pretty popular song, I will say, talking about the DM and it going down in the DM. What DM stands for, it's a social media term, it's direct messaging or direct message. So these are private, quote unquote, messages that somebody would send that's not on their public social media. A lot of times we see some of these messages going on in open relationships or if you don't want their partner to know. So there's definitely boundaries being pushed down in the DM. Now we have in and out. I heard that in one of our trainings, and they were saying that you have two partners. One is your in partner or your in girl or guy, and they're the ones that you kind of show off to your parents, and then there's the out person, and that's the one that maybe no one knows about. That person tends to be more fun. That also connects to the word side, and often side is used with the term side chick or main, and this again has everything to do with that dynamic of open relationships and multiple partners. And then the last one, flipper. So I remember flipper was a dolphin in a movie, but that is not how it's being used today. So flipper is actually a word that is used normally to describe a girl who has a lot of partners, but has also been used, if you think of the term swingers, sometimes people will say, oh, that couple is a flipper, like they have multiple partners. So I'm only bringing this up not to say that every young person has this sense of open relationships. There's definitely young people today that still have one partner or they're dating one exclusive person, but just trying to understand where the young people are that you work with and maybe some of the words that they use. This is the activity we promote. And you can find the Tweak Your Speak activity instructions and kind of handouts in the toolkit that's available here on the webinar panel. So you can see, how would you tweak your speak? Do some of these words apply to the students you work with, or are there other words? So I'm going to check the chat box real quick before I transition. Maybe there's some other words out there that we're not aware of. And if you have questions, we definitely will be addressing those at the end. But all this is to say that we really want to identify how young people are talking about dating, relationships, what is their understanding, so we can begin to have the conversation about boundaries and respect in a way that's going to be relatable to them. All right. So now let's go into a few statistics on the role of technology. So a lot of you may be familiar with digital abuse or abuse that happens between partners through social media, social networking sites, or online. This could be any form of digital communications. So we know here there's a few studies that show that 1 in 4 teens have been called names or harassed or put down by a partner through cell phones and texting. It's pretty common ground for that, especially after a breakup. Nearly 1 in 5 say that their partners have used social networking sites to harass or put them down. Again, this happens very common after a breakup, but it can happen throughout the relationship. And Grace and Michaela will definitely be talking about examples when we get into power and control. 1 in 10 students report being threatened physically by a partner. So this connects to that sense of verbal and emotional abuse, but online through digital communications. And 1 in 3 teens have expressed excessive text messaging. Here it says 10, 20, or 30 times an hour by a partner, asking those W questions. Where are you? Who are you with? What are you doing? So that sense of power and control is definitely in those messages, and it's also something that happens a lot, I think, when we feel like, okay, now we're in a relationship, so I have to check in and know where the person is 24/7. So this is just to speak on how relevant it is and how the prevalence of abuse with the young people we are working with. So here are a few statistics on that. So now I'm going to pass it to Grace and Michaela to talk about power and control with youth today.
Wonderful, thank you. So this is Michaela Thomas. I want to start by just saying that when we're talking about dating abuse, in all the forms that it can take, what we're really talking about is a pattern of behavior that's used to gain and maintain power and control. So we want to talk about some of the most common shapes that can take for teens specifically. Age differences and perceived inexperience in a relationship can be a very big tactic for controlling someone in a relationship. There's a really high value placed on perceived relationship experience or background among teens. And that can be used by an older person or someone who has more of a background of relationships by emphasizing those differences in experience and using that to establish their authority over what a healthy relationship looks like, what a normal relationship looks like, and in doing so they can create an imbalance in power and control within the relationship. So some of the ways that we can see that playing out is saying things to their partner like, you don't understand how relationships work, or you're so immature, or this is normal, this is just how it is. I'm trying to help you improve. So there are a lot of ways that can be used against someone. And we see that this manifests a lot in the form of sexual coercion, but it can also influence setting boundaries in the relationship, communication, and conflict resolution. Something else just to kind of go off of what Jasmine was saying about the idea of sides and mains and ins and outs is in this culture now where there are much more open relationships and you may not be your partner's only partner. There's a much higher stake of kind of remaining in their mind and fulfilling their needs and expectations. And this can lead someone to be more vulnerable to that kind of control because they feel like they need to be stepping up and meeting their partner's needs. So another way that we see this playing out is utilizing a lack of knowledge for help resources. So research shows us that when a teen is experiencing unhealthy or abusive relationships, the first support they seek, not surprisingly, is with their peers. And because healthy relationship education isn't broadly provided for youth, while unhealthy relationship dynamics are reinforced daily in our media, this can lead to a bit of a blind leading the blind environment. Even with the best of intentions, peers may not be able to provide the kind of larger context for healthy relationships. So abuse really kind of thrives in that isolation from support and information and relies on building a sense that that is normal. When there definitely is support out there, as we all know, but there can be some boundaries for adolescents to reach out to that support. There can be a general distrust of adults or authority figures that can keep teens from reaching out for support that they need. They may need to reach out for support without their parents' knowledge, which isn't always an option if they're a minor. So the realities and obstacles that teens face are also not always recognized by some providers and some support. And that can leave youth feeling kind of alienated when they do reach out for support. Sometimes we may underestimate the severity. They may be dealing with experiences that we don't anticipate being part of a teen relationship, and we may think, are parts of a more adult relationship, like financial dependence, shared living situations, pregnancy or children, these things that we may just not even may not even enter our radar initially when we're thinking about how to support them. So all of these factors can definitely influence how comfortable teens are in reaching out for support and can contribute to that feeling of isolation from resources and help. So I will turn it over now to Grace for the next few bullets.
Awesome. And yeah, that isolation part is huge. It's that moment when, because of a lack of boundaries, which is our next point, that the person is trapped in a relationship where they don't feel like they're valued enough, or they don't feel like they deserve anything more. And the boundaries are used to justify abuse because there aren't any set limits. So the one who might be feeling dating abuse doesn't think their relationship is bad because they haven't set the boundaries that are in a healthy relationship. And that goes into the setting limits. Setting limits happens when there's no boundaries in relationships. So a person can say that you can't go out with your friends tonight because you have to come see me, or I don't want you talking to that boy because he makes me jealous. And these limits are very detrimental to youth because it's kind of, they see this abuse and they think it's okay. So they think it's okay that their boyfriend wants to see them all the time or wants to be with them all the time. So this kind of thing can hurt youth when they're younger because they learn about unhealthy relationships. Like, they learn about these unhealthy relationships and think they are the way that all relationships work. And finally, for power and control, justifying abuse. The biggest statement for this is the statement, I'm only doing this because I love you. And that's really dangerous because, again, it's that idea that youth will think that this is okay, that the person might hit them or call them names or do things that shouldn't be in a respectful relationship because they love them and because they would do anything for them, they're okay to stay in that abusive relationship and continue to experience that abuse. And online communications are very vital in power and control, especially with how the openness of information today is that pretty much anyone can find you on the internet, and that can also kind of involve a lot of things that you want to keep private. People can see, and they can follow you and see what you're doing, and that can often happen where the abuser will follow their significant other on social media, maybe see something, a picture of her with someone that he doesn't like or she doesn't like, and that can lead to just distrust in the relationship. Controlling online posting is also a big thing in power control, where it's just you filter through what's showing about the relationship. So the relationship could be a very unhealthy relationship, but social media allows the abuser to present an image that the relationship is okay and that they're in love and that nothing bad is going on. Excessive content is also big with texting, the direct messaging, because there's constant contact. And if boundaries are not set on that constant contact, it can kind of just get to the point where a person feels obligated to respond even when they don't want to. So it's kind of just, it's really a dangerous cycle that kind of just keeps happening once the power and control structure is off. And finally, demands to share passwords on social media. Again, your password is something that should be yours only, because our social media accounts are private accounts that we want to keep to ourselves. And this, again, is another breach of power and control. So all in all, technology is actually helping to exacerbate the negative effects of power and control because, again, of the ability to access the information about other people, stay in constant contact with them, and also just use their social media to continue the abuse while still presenting a nice public image. So that's all I have to say on power and control. So.
Awesome. We can go to the next slide.
Okay. Okay. Breaking the code. So the thing is that I feel like since boundaries is a thing that most people should understand but don't. And most youth do not pay attention to online boundaries, which kind of results in digital abuse. So the main point with this is teaching youth to then learn how to set healthy boundaries. And that's kind of something they need to learn how to set at the beginning of a relationship so that they know, the two people know what they're getting into and know what each person feels comfortable with in a relationship, which is really important to maintaining that mutual respect. Some examples of healthy boundaries are setting when it's okay for your boyfriend or girlfriend to text you, how frequently they can text you, establishing how quickly you should be expected to respond. Because I know that sometimes in abusive relationships, there could be the girlfriend or boyfriend messaging like 50 times and getting mad when there's not a response. So setting a healthy boundary on like that texting limits and how you feel comfortable is really important to getting to healthy relationships. Another thing is understanding when to post and when not to post about the relationship online. Like, you know, on Twitter or the Facebook official, which is like a status on Facebook where you can say like you're in a relationship. This is important because it's just kind of knowing like what each person is comfortable with. And maybe if they don't want to post the relationship online, then you shouldn't. Or maybe they don't want to share a certain photo or don't want something to be shared online. Then it should be something that you both agree on and agree to not share so that you have that mutual respect. And a couple other things, understanding if it's okay to use each other's devices. Sometimes if you're not okay with someone looking at your phone, then you have to set that boundary, or the youth have to set that boundary so that there's no really distrust in the relationship or someone isn't trying to look through the other person's phone to see if they're cheating on them, which is a really big breach of healthy respect in relationships. Again, back to passwords. I think it's really important when you're working with youth is even though it's nice to have all that information and it seems okay to be sharing passwords, if you want the digital privacy, you are entitled to the digital privacy. So you have a right to keep your social media accounts or keep your online accounts to yourself. Because while relationships are about sharing with another person, you have a right to keep some things to yourself. So,
awesome. Yeah, and when we think about creating healthy relationships online, we're really in a kind of a new frontier right now because you know, online culture is invented and reinvented rapidly by the technology and the sites that exist. And so there, you know, as Grace is saying, there aren't a whole lot of norms around healthy boundaries and healthy online interactions. Social media and digital connectedness has created a culture that really values sharing our lives. We share, you know, where we are, what we're doing, who we're with, how we're doing, and there's not yet a real big value put on personal boundaries and privacy. Has become more than just a technological option. it's really seen as a powerful symbol of commitment, trust, and intimacy within relationships for teens. So sharing really is caring. It's a symbol of their caring. So a couple ways that we really see that play out are with sexting and with sharing passwords. So with sexting, as much as the risks involved in sending private photos and videos may seem like an obvious deterrent for some, it's the reality of youth culture, and it's likely not going anywhere anytime soon. So it's really important for us to understand it and to think about how to approach it when supporting youth. So sexting can kind of be seen as a new base on the relationship baseball field, like when we're talking about hitting first base and second base. And it's a new form of courtship in the same way that a first kiss or a first date might be. It's a symbol of a next passwords. For a lot of us too, even the simple access to our phone means access to our text messages, to our email, to our social media accounts, to our calendar, to our personal notes, and so much more. So there's a lot about that that makes it a very vulnerable thing. So there's nothing inherently wrong about sharing sex or passwords with a partner that you can trust to respect and protect your privacy. It doesn't necessarily pose a security threat. But what we're seeing is that it's not just seen as an option in relationships anymore, it's seen as an expectation. And so it's really hard for someone who maybe has a partner that's not as trustworthy for them to create boundaries around that because it is just so expected. We talk with a lot of people whose partners are leading them to feel like they're being unreasonable for not sharing in these ways, or that by not sharing they're actively keeping secrets or showing distrust. So obviously, there's a lot of work that we need to do around that. So how can we break down these norms? Clearly, there is, a lack here. What's lacking here is support for youth in controlling relationships by creating a culture of boundaries. And we can start by approaching from a place of understanding, because the importance of social media isn't always understood completely by adults. And the approach that we can take sometimes can feel very limiting to youth. So, we talk about, how you can limit your youth, how much you can limit your interactions, you can limit sharing, you can limit the time you spend. And it's really important to realize that to a teen whose world is so predominantly on social media, that feels like social isolation. And it doesn't really feel like a reasonable option. So instead, we can come from a place of respect for the value that's placed on sharing and, the very real challenges of choosing not to share. And we can work towards options that feel empowering rather than limiting and isolating. So, creating an empowerment-based culture of boundaries can start with giving youth the tools and the language to start the conversations and to establish their own boundaries in a way that they feel most comfortable with. A couple ways that can look when it comes to sexting, maybe sending news without showing identifying features like faces or tattoos. Learning more about online privacy and password protection options so that they can put certain boundaries in place without feeling like they have to give up their entire online community. Little things like that we can really work with based on kind of what their personal experience is, what their needs are, and what their concerns are. But it really starts with making boundaries a part of our vocabulary and doing so in a very empowering way with youth. So I will go ahead and pass it off to Jasmine now.
Thank you, Michaela. So one thing that we get a lot in our trainings and trying to balance, working and understanding and empowering young people, but also, age differences and teen and the idea of sexting and sending nudes, and it's very overwhelming. And like Michaela said, it has now become an expectation. I say, for some of the adults on the webinar, for us, we could think about, those bases like first base, holding hands, second, third, fourth. Now it feels like sexting and sending these images is just something that you have to do. And what I would encourage everyone to do is to have that conversation, especially with our minors, on when those boundaries are pushed, when sexting is present, what are those potential consequences? And it's not to just wave the finger around and say, hey, this is illegal, or this could be bad, or this image can be shared, but getting them to understand how much access they truly are putting out there, whether it's passwords, whether it's granting access to a phone, whether it's a social media account or an image that you share, even if it's a selfie that has nothing to do with the sex, how can that potentially be used against you? That's a question that I encourage everyone to think about, and it's not to build this scare tactic, but really to think about like, okay, I'm comfortable with this now, but could this be something that I may not be comfortable with later? If this person didn't respect me, if we didn't have that trust and privacy, if we didn't talk about this, am I leaving it open for something that could be potentially harmful for myself or someone else? Worst case scenario that I hear from a lot of young people that we work with is it's all fine until it's being taken advantage of, and I want them to think about that before they send out the info. So, some boundaries they may have more leniency towards, and some of us in the room or some of us on the webinar, we may be like absolutely not, but we really need them to identify and empower them to have those conversations of what are healthy boundaries for them, what is unhealthy, what is abusive. And even when things seem a little gray, helping them identify why these could be potentially harmful is key. So that's one thing to think about when you're considering having the conversation on breaking the code. All of this stuff is definitely very normal for them, but we can still have the conversation on what happens when normal gets a little pushed into the abusive or unhealthy side. What happens when these things that were normal at first are making us really uncomfortable, and what would make us uncomfortable if this information got out. So it's definitely not an easy conversation to have. We do have a lot of resources and handouts within the toolkit to address the relationship spectrum, boundaries, how to start the conversation. So I definitely invite you to explore that and really just build a level of comfort, and definitely a theme of empowering young people to identify these traits, because that's when they're more likely to make changes. And if we're not just telling them, but we're inviting them to conversate and include some of their thoughts and their lived realities and experiences. So let's move on. Okay, so now we're going to go to the starting the conversation side, and we discussed a lot about what the code is and what we need to break down, and I'm using the word code because it's the most creative term I could have for a whole lot of stuff is going online that we may not be familiar with. There's definitely now, with every young person who is born today, they are born into the digital age. They know the internet. They can't remember a time when the internet didn't exist. Like, what do you mean there's not Wi-Fi? I know that not having Wi-Fi is almost as bad as like people are like, what? You're on a plane that doesn't have Wi-Fi? It's foreign, right? So let's talk about how we can have these healthy relationship conversations. So the youth that we work with may not immediately want to talk to, us as adults or service providers or parents or family members. We know that they're more likely to talk to their friends. They're more likely to start the conversation with someone they're close to, and it could be an adult, but maybe not the parent or teacher role. It's all different for every person. But these are the three highlights the key takeaways or highlights we want you to leave with after the webinar. So one, healthy relationships. This is our focus as a partnership. We want to make sure that we center all of our communications on healthy relationships and empowering youth to create healthy relationships. When we get into resources, we strive to bring youth resources they need to meet them where they are, and Michaela is definitely going to share some information on that and how we do that through Love is Respect. And helping a friend, I mentioned, young people will reach out to a peer before anyone else if they are going to reach out to someone. And sometimes that's where it stops. So we need to make sure that we're talking about how to give friends the info they need to safely talk about, well, I'm not sure if what you're going through is cool or not cool. They may not use the words healthy or unhealthy. They may not even know, but making sure that we understand that their peers are the number one influencers very often, and what friends can do. And we definitely have a lot of resources on Love is Respect to guide friends on how to help someone they know or maybe even help themselves. So I'm going to pass it on to Grace so Grace can talk a little bit more about healthy relationships today.
Okay, let's see. So starting the conversation is really important, especially among friends. So what is really important that we really need to strive for as educators and advocates and youth is just to encourage young people to showcase examples of healthy relationships online. So showcasing examples of maybe a time where they showed mutual respect, or sharing posts with their boyfriend or girlfriend and kind of a little message about how their relationship shows mutual respect. Because it's kind of, if we could fill like news feeds and Twitter feeds with that kind of image, I feel like it could kind of maybe change the conversation and change what people's ideas are on relationships and healthy versus unhealthy, cool versus not cool. Going on, youth-led advocacy is vital to reaching other youth who might be in abusive relationships. I'm a firm believer of that because of my organization that I run, Kick in Violence. So we've seen just a lot of success in just talking with and having youth talk to youth. So once a month we hold forums where we just have youth come together. We pull out an article that's kind of concerning healthy relationships, or maybe something that seems unhealthy, and we talk about it. And I feel like when you have youth getting together and talking about relationships, it starts to click that there are healthy and unhealthy behaviors that we really need to watch out for. Also encouraging youth to post on social media is important, because that's where youth are seeing all their information. So maybe having youth encouraged to post about Love is Respect resources online, or share a YouTube video that's concerning healthy relationships. Those are kind of the steps to help encourage more youth-based advocacy and kind of encouraging and to starting the conversation among youth for youth. Finally, a really, really important thing to do is to teach youth the signs of online abuse, as we discussed earlier, so that they kind of know when they can call people out on it, and not in a bad way, but more of like, hey, this kind of language towards your girlfriend that you're posting online, or this kind of thing that you're doing isn't okay, or the oversharing, or all these different things aren't okay. And kind of from there be ready to start a conversation with that person who might not even know they're being abusive, or might not even know they're showing unhealthy behaviors. So that's really important, just knowing those signs and not being afraid to stand up for healthy relationships and really just get the word out there. So I'm good. I believe that Michaela is next.
Great, yeah. So, another really great way to start conversations is to explore on our own and also connect people with resources. There are a lot of really good resources that can provide youth with information and education around what a healthy relationship looks like, online and off, and also red flags to look for when something may not be so healthy. So it can be not only really empowering in that it gives them language that they need to be able to articulate their needs and boundaries, but also, can kind of just validate something that they may already kind of be feeling on an instinctual level is not right in their relationship, just by seeing it written down or talking with an advocate and hearing that that's not normal or is unhealthy or is abusive can be hugely empowering. Our website has a lot of really fantastic information about ways to recognize unhealthy or abusive behavior in relationships, about how to understand power and control within the context of social media and online life, about setting and also maintaining boundaries in a relationship, and tips on how to help a friend or a classmate. For parents, we also have a great tip sheet on how to help your child if you think that they might be in an unhealthy relationship. So in addition to all the kind of online content we have, another really great resource is speaking with one of our advocates. We have phone, chat, and text available 24/7 where someone can go on and just talk about what's going on, what their concerns are, and an advocate can educate, can provide further resources, and if need be, can kind of explore some safety planning options with them for that. When it comes to helping a friend, since online life is so social, having a plan that you can share with friends can really help you in building your sense of protection and your boundaries digitally. So talking about what information you're comfortable with them sharing and what you're not. Since so much of our lives are kind of shared through our friends' social media accounts as much as our own, if we can talk to people about what photos to post and what not to post, when it's okay to check us in on Facebook, when it's not, being able to just have that conversation with friends and include them in your safety plan or your boundaries can really take it to the next step. And finally, we can also help by just encouraging people to reach out. It can definitely, as I was saying, it can feel very isolating and it can feel very confusing when you're in a relationship that's not healthy and your partner is doing everything that they can do to convince you that it is healthy. So everyone in a relationship that has concerns, they absolutely deserve support regardless of whether they want to leave or not. And that's what we're here for. So abuse in a relationship can often feel really unique to the situation and to the couple, but by talking to others who understand abuse, youth can really start to recognize the tactics and feel less isolated and more empowered in that experience. All right, we can move on to the next slide.
Great. Thank you, Michaela. So the goal for this webinar, and honestly the goal that we should have every day in working with young people to prevent, and end dating violence and create healthy relationships, is talking about how we are going to take action. So if we look at our community in the center, right, we have, in this case, we're going to highlight youth and adults and the roles that we all play to make sure that we are building a response and that we're working together. We know that there has to be some type of community response starting from, the social ecologic model. We have the individual within, and it branches out to community members. In order for us to create sustainable change, we need to make sure that we work together, are able to recognize these signs, but also that we're coming up with some type of plan. Now, when I think of plan, Michaela talked a lot about, safety planning and having a plan with your friends. We definitely want to advocate for safety planning for the individual who may be experiencing abuse, but also, what is the community's plan in terms of schools, organizations, policies? How are we going to take a stand to recognize that these behaviors that may be going on could be unhealthy, could lead to abuse, and we are going to stand up and say that we deserve to have healthy relationships. And what does that look like? I know that we can all make a difference together. It definitely does take a community, and we will see the change. I'm already seeing change just over the years from when I started doing this work. Young people were able to recognize a lot of physical signs of abuse, but now the first ones that they're bringing up are more verbal, emotional, jealousy, threats, lack of trust. With the digital communications, yes, there's a lot of dangerous things that we can think of as adults that may be going on, but technology can be used for good in terms of raising awareness. How can we build that community response everywhere, even if we're not face-to-face? And we do a lot of that, working on a national level, bringing youth together. So Grace is going to shed some light on some of the roles that youth can play, and then Michaela is going to wrap us up with some of the roles that adults can play, and then we'll come back to the community as a whole. So Grace?
Thank you. Okay. So youth can do a lot, because they really, as they are kind of the focus of this issue, they can also be the solution to this issue. Again, reflecting what we said on the previous slide about starting the conversation, youth can really be big advocates on social media for healthy relationships and can really encourage their friends to do the same. It's so important for youth to be really active, especially on social media, because it's just, if more people posted about healthy relationships, then we would see a lot more change, because a lot more people would be exposed to what a healthy relationship is and would be striving to work towards that healthy relationship. Finally, to wrap up the youth section, youth can kind of start in their schools and communities and start youth community action teams like the one that I run with Kick and Violence. So that's really important, and that actually helps youth to kind of work with adults better, because you'll be working with school officials to maybe do more information about dating violence in their school, or to have more workshops in the community for youth to learn about dating violence, or work with a shelter to kind of do more information about dating violence, or that kind of thing. So that's where youth can really get involved, not just with their peers, but also with adults and community agencies.
Wonderful. And for adults, one of the best things that I can ask is, taking time to educate ourselves on the unique challenges that face teens today that we maybe didn't experience growing up, and also on how to recognize the warning signs of dating abuse. There's a lot of really great resources on our website, not only for teens, but for adults who are supporting teens. So I really encourage everyone to take some time to explore that. Another great way you can help is just by connecting youth in your life to information and support, to our website, or to whatever programs might exist in their schools, and really encouraging them to engage there and to learn. And then third, just advocating for community action. Adults have a lot of power potentially to really get into schools, get into community programs, and really make sure that the interests of teens and the unique challenges of teens are being heard.
Great. Thank you, Michaela. And to add on to the community piece in terms of education and understanding digital safety, there's definitely a lot of resources that we have available on loveisrespect.org, from, Start Talking, a national curriculum, to individual conversations on what is digital safety and what is love. There's definitely a lot of tools that you can use, but also you can feel free to create and make these true to your community and true to the youth that you work with. So we're going to go on now to the wrap-up section, just to highlight what we discussed. There's a lot of great information that was shared in a very short amount of time, so we definitely want to open the floor for questions. And by doing that, what you can do is there should be a chat feature or a question feature on your toolbar. Some of you have already submitted some questions, so Brianna's going to help us with that. But a real quick wrap-up, we hope that you learned a little bit more about the dynamics of youth relationships, from Teen Speak to how they define boundaries. There's definitely some facts about digital abuse, and there's a lot more that you can learn on our website. We emphasize the need for boundaries. Healthy boundaries are so important in creating healthy relationships, and the need to have a conversation with the youth we work with every day, and have this conversation be something that's open to growing and understanding, even when we don't understand some of the dynamics, just being open to listening and not judging, and really being there for young people by connecting them to resources and safety plans. So Brianna, I think we're ready now for questions, if we want to read off a few.
Yeah, we do have a couple. One that recently came in from Olivia is, what are some best practices for supporting a friend when they are the first point of conversation for a young person in an abusive relationship?
Great. So I'll start it off, and then Michaela, if you want to jump in with your expertise from the hotline. I will say that number one thing that I recommend is listening without jumping to conclusions or judgment. It's very easy, as someone who cares deeply about your friend, to want to grab them and say, this is not okay, let's leave now. But it's really about empowering your friend to understand that these things that they may be going through that you notice, check to see if they notice what you're noticing, if it's jealousy or just if they come and say, I don't know what to do, connect them to resources. So, Kayla, if you had anything to add.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. What I might add to that is just kind of realizing, it's important for everyone to realize that, because abuse comes from a place of taking someone's sense of power and control away from them, that we as supporters, whether it's as friends or parents or service providers, one of the best things that we can do for someone is make sure to leave them in the driver's seat and never do anything where we are also taking away their power and control, because then we're leaving them as powerless in the situation as their partner is. So by showing them respect for their understanding of the situation, by letting them know you are the professional here. You are the one who knows what's going on in your relationship and how best to help you in this moment. And I am just here to support you in whatever you choose to do. Can really just kind of reinstill some of the power that they may feel has been taken away from them.
Yep, absolutely. The key word is I believe you, and I'm here. How can I help you? I think those are all pretty great words to use. And thanks for the question.
We have a few more questions coming in. One is from Stacy. Many girls view this kind of behavior as love and caring. I think she means kind of like the more jealous behaviors. What is the most effective approach to help girls understand that this is not healthy, girls and boys?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I'll start us off and then feel free to jump in. I think the idea of jealousy being equal to love is everywhere. And it's hard to break that down, right? When we see that in TV shows and movies and videos, and even when we're very young and we hear that someone who teases us means that they like us, or the child that's picking on us is because they have a crush on us. So it is hard to break down some of those social norms. But what I like to do with jealousy in particular, we'll use that as the example here, is break down where that jealousy is coming from. So someone may feel jealous because you're talking to someone else, but that has nothing to do because you're talking to someone else. It has everything to do with that person's personal feelings of insecurity or the sense of loss and that fear. So what I try to do to encourage healthy relationship traits and a positive sense of self is really spending some time to have a relationship with us as individuals. So that may mean going to that awkward place to think about, like, what do I want? What is healthy for me? What are some things that I like to do on my own? What are some things that make me feel like I'm not sure how I feel about this? But the reality is there's still, and in the classrooms that I work in, there are still young people, both boys and girls, men and women, who will say, if they don't feel jealous, that means they don't love me. So it's definitely a social norm we break down, but I try to emphasize that jealousy is not coming from a place of love. It's really coming from a sense of fear of losing that person, or maybe lack of self-esteem, or potentially being in another relationship in the past where someone wasn't, honest or faithful. Like, that can really do a lot of harm, but it's about having communication, about saying what we do want, what makes us feel uncomfortable, and hopefully feeling safe enough to communicate some of the things that aren't going as well with our partners. So a lot of conversations to answer that question on just what is a healthy sense of me, what do I want, and what is healthy. A lot of times we're not getting those healthy role models from TV and movies and songs. So we need to do that first before we can get in to discuss how it's not healthy.
All right, awesome. I think we have time. There's some good questions here, but I think we have time for maybe one more. From Alyssa, what is the most effective way to let boys or young men know that, one, there's no shame in speaking up about an abusive partner, and two, yes, girls can also be abusive?
Yes, it's one of my favorite things to talk about because I still get pushback and I still get the surprised look like, huh, girls can be abusive? there are great tools that we have, and there's a great video that we show in the Start Talking curriculum that is a social experiment that shows the dynamics of gender stereotypes. So it shows, the boyfriend being abusive first, then the girlfriend, and how no one intervenes, and this sense of shame and guilt. So what I try to do, we come from an approach of making young men allies in the movement, empowering them to speak up. A lot of times the young men that we work with will say, this could never happen to my little sister. I would never allow this to happen to my cousin, my big sister, or little sister. But we try to get them to think about themselves. Like, okay, we understand that you don't want your little sister or big sister to be abused, but it is possible for girls to act in ways that may be controlling you in a way that you're not comfortable with. Or maybe they're realizing, maybe they think it's just the way that person shows love, because for far too long I think we've been conditioned that when women or girls act out in loud ways, I'll use that example because that's the easiest way I can explain it and how it was presented in the classroom. One of our young men was saying, well, girls just get loud and they scream and that shows that they love you. So it's a lot of norms that we have to break down, but first saying yes, boys can experience abuse at the same way girls can. There may not be as many statistics, but why do you think it might make what would be the obstacle for a young man to be able to come up and speak out? A lot of time it's the embarrassment. A lot of the time it's the fear of being excluded or being made fun of. And honestly, that happens for young women who are in abusive relationships. So it really doesn't know a gender. It's just being able to speak on it and putting it out there so it becomes normal to have these conversations, and that's the first step, I would say.
Yeah, I might add to that as well, just the idea that kind of expanding everyone's viewpoint to include more about emotional abuse. I think for a lot of people, we think of abuse and we think of physical. And so someone who is experiencing emotional abuse from their partner but has no fear of physical danger may have a harder time connecting the dots between what they're experiencing and what we talk about. So really emphasizing emotional abuse and how it knows no gender and can happen to anyone, and that reaching out and getting support is really, it takes a lot of strength, and it's valued.
Great, thank you so much, Michaela, and thank you, Jasmine and Grace. I think we're out of time now, correct? So very much appreciate the three of you being on this webinar today and sharing your expertise and insight. On behalf of Love is Respect, I want to thank all of you who have attended this webinar for being here today. Quick note, you will be asked to complete a brief optional survey after you log out of this webinar, and we would really appreciate your feedback. I've also gotten a lot of questions about if this is going to be available afterwards. Yes, we are recording it, or we did record it, and it will be available on the Love is Respect website, and the toolkit, which you can find in the handouts tab right now and download, will also be available on the Love is Respect website. So please come back to loveisrespect.org, check it out. There's so much good information there, as well as on breakthecycle.org. Really appreciate all of you today, and thank you so much for your time.